I did tell Michael, our curator, Michael Martins, that I would also urge all of you to try to promote our future lectures and our future serenades that we'll be participating in next month. I'm almost afraid to do so. After the ladies and I fought outside, that berated me over the fact that they were being kicked out. But what we will do is we will try to do everything possible to try to oblige the venue for the next presentation. Tonight's presenter will be Bob Kitchen, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with Bob. Bob is a longtime resident of Fall River, and he stresses that he comes from the east end of the city and has always lived in the east end. He graduated from Bridgewater in 1962 and received his master's degree in 1966. He's taught at Portsmouth High School for 37 years. And for 23 of those years, he was the head of the science department. And Bob is also a member of the board of directors and Fall River Historical Society. So Bob, I'll turn everything over to you, and I hope you enjoy the lecture.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I don't think we can make this room much bigger unless they put a balcony in or something. That's the only thing I can think. Again, I offer my apologies for the size of the crowd. I shouldn't, but in any case, you don't like to turn people away, but it will at least be on television. Every year we look for titles, something we're going to do something on. And it kind of struck me that as I look through Facebook and I see all of these Facebook postings, there's an awful lot on downtown Fall River. But what I didn't want to do was take 100 postcards and put them online, all showing pictures of Fall River downtown. I thought it might be nice to see how downtown developed from a tiny crossroads to a very, very busy city, okay, at time. And it was a busy city, and it was, the thing that surprises me, it was busy even in the 1870s and 80s. Another thing that struck me was this book came out. We now publish, we have our own press at the Historical Society, and this book came out. This man named Thomas Burrell was a historian. He was a citizen of Fall River, a member of the Historical Society. And in those days, members of the Historical Society, it was a very small group, would do papers and present them to the group. And he did two, and maybe we have more, but we published two. One is on Main Street in the 1870s and 80s. And the thing that amazed me there was the fact that it was a pretty busy place in those days, okay? The other is A Businessman's Reminiscences of 50 Years. And of course, he was a businessman down in downtown. So between that book, and this is a commercial, by the way, so we do have some on the sale over on the side. You might want to take a look at them. They're certainly worthwhile. You saw this slide last week. Bill had it. Okay, Freeman's Purchase. You have to keep in mind that Freeman's Purchase occurred in 1657. It's all about that to the left, 30 rods wide, about 4 miles deep. Interesting thing about it is the proprietors who invested in those pieces of land, not a single one of them ever lived on that land. They sold them, they subdivided them, they did a lot of other things. And nobody moved in for some time, probably because there was some unrest between certainly the Native Americans who were seeing their land disappear and the colonials who kind of almost forced them into selling some of this land. Times had changed from the time of Massasoit. And of course, we have King Philip's War, which, excuse me, King Philip's War breaks out. And by the way, King Philip's War, if you take the number of combatants and the number of casualties, was one of the bloodiest wars in American history. It fits right up there. Number of combatants and the number of casualties. It was a bloody war. When the war ended in a year and a half, 2 years, the Indians were decimated. There were very few men left. Those that weren't killed in the war, some were executed, some were sold into slavery out in the Caribbean, where they soon died from the heat. Now, to the right, you see the Pecasset Purchase. This was made after the war, and supposedly the deal was made with Indians, and I don't know what Indians were left to be able to complete the deal, to be honest with you. But in any case, you'll notice those lots are a lot smaller. The Battle of Fall River. What's that got to do with downtown? We're a city that actually had a Civil War battle occur in downtown, right? It occurred approximately where the City Hall is today. In 1776, the British left Boston at the beginning of the war, moved to Newport. They controlled all of Narragansett Bay from Newport. And then they would send these expeditions out to burn towns. They were burning grist mills and lumber mills and anything that would provide goods and services to the colonials. And in 1778, they sent an expedition to Fall River. They are successful in burning the grist mill and the lumber mill. They make the mistake of marching up the hill where they are greeted by about 24 colonials. A battle occurs, 2 British soldiers die. They are buried very close to where they died on a farm. And then later on, when they were developing downtown, they actually took the bodies, put them in the North Burial Ground. Nobody took the time to mark the graves. And so they were buried in an unmarked grave. Okay. This is the town building. It was built in 1714. It was on Main Street. And this was a building where you would actually, in this case, it was designed for church services and some city functions. Never particularly successful. Eventually, I think it just rotted away in the end. Okay. Now, what I would like you to do, and this is a map that's really, all I want you to do is concentrate on this. Remember the Crossroads. These were the crossroads where Fall River began. Fall River becomes a town in 1803. And forget all of these buildings here because they weren't here. But this was where Fall River was, this little section here. There were 18 houses in Fall River at that time. 17 were located here on Central Street. This was East Central, eventually becoming Bedford, West Central, and North Main and South Main. And last week, Bill Gonzalo mentioned the Cleft Rock, which is right here. And that was just the tip of a great deposit. I would like to mention just one thing here. A lot of the comments you see on Facebook about granite in Fall River, you have to keep in mind it was everywhere, okay? When you look at Fall River, it's a big lump. That big lump is all granite. It's all granite. It's everywhere. Now, the first granite to be mined, why dig in the ground when you can just cut it? It's exposed. So those are the ledges. But eventually, some of these mills were made. They simply pushed the dirt back, cut the granite, built the mill right there. It saved a lot of transportation costs in moving those stones from quarries to the mills themselves. Of course, those eventually disappeared as the city began to develop. I show you this picture only because it's interesting, okay? And it's in the 1760s. These are troops from Fall River. And if you look in the background, you can see the city is pretty well developed. It's a dirt street, that's for sure, but it is pretty well developed. What?
1860 Civil War?
The 1860?
Yeah, you said 1760.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1860, folks, 1860s. I think this is about 1861, I believe. Yeah, okay. This is Thomas Burrell. He's the fellow who wrote the book. Pretty good historian. He's got a great sense of humor. And it's kind of a neat book, a neat read. It's fairly quick. And you might want to add it to your Fall River collection. I think this is the Congregational Church. This was built in 1832 in Fall River. That's a rather magnificent building, I think, to be built in 1832, and it's on North Main Street. And by the way, Burrell's book takes the buildings on North Main Street and goes almost building by building. And then he gets down to the City Hall, of course, and then goes up South Main Street. Okay. This fellow here is George Mellon, Mellon Hotel. And I picked a couple of different people. Not that he was a good businessman. There were others that were better, I suppose. But he was an interesting character. He had the Mellon Hotel. George Mellon also invested in the trolley lines. And then remember, 2 years ago, we did a program on amusement parks, and he built the Forest Hills Gardens in the north end of the city, okay? And that was what's called a trolley park, so that they would give some business to the trolleys on the weekend. And it wasn't very successful, by the way, so he wasn't successful in everything he did. This is the old stage, Steep Brook and Globe Village. It ran between the two. This belonged to the Historical Society for a long while. If you remember, I think it was down in the mill where Burlington used to be, when it was a mill outlet. And we had to move it one time, and we finally, it ended up in a barn someplace. And then in 2003, we had the bicentennial of the city, and we decided we would use this. We were afraid to put horses on it because they thought they might pull it apart because it was so old. And so what happened was it was in the barn. So I think Kathy Carey and some of the other gals went down to clean it up, and of course, while it was in the barn, all of the mice that were in there's a lot of mice droppings in the stagecoach. You can see this, by the way. It's at the Freetown Historical Society. So it has a good home right now. That was followed by, of course, the trolley in, I think, 1860, George, right? The horse-drawn trolleys, and then, 1880, okay, the horse-drawn trolleys, and then followed by the electric trolleys. Picture in North Main Street. It's dirt. You know, they would roll this to pack it down. They had rollers. But when it rained heavily, you can imagine the quagmire that this would turn into. And all of those wagons that are on there all have those steel wheels which dig deep into the mud. Sidewalks were just large pieces of flat stone that were laid down, and then later on they started to get macadam, which was a mixture of tar and gravel. They started to make sidewalks out of macadam. This is the store of, excuse me, this is Elijah Fuller's store, and it's kind of interesting. We have a whole series of pictures here. And Burrell in his book is kind of interesting. He says that they use the same scale to weigh everything. So if you bought a pound of flour, you got it weighed on the scale. And he says if you were lucky, the clerk took the time to blow the dust off before they weighed the next item, okay? And so, and he says, once in a while they would wash it, but he never saw it ever washed. So no one ever bothered doing that, okay? But they sold all sorts of things. He also mentions the fact that they would sell, you could buy a slice of pie, and in the summertime, to keep the flies off the pie, they had a wire little screen cage that went over the top of the pie. And he said, you know, they would take that off, they cut the slice of pie, and he says, by the time, if you bought a piece of mincemeat pie, you couldn't tell the mincemeat pie from the currant pie because of all the flies that were on it. You could also get a glass of milk to go with that piece of pie, and they had a common glass, okay? Now, once in a while they would wash it, but if it got busy, they didn't have time. And so the guy would just dig it out. My dad, my grandmother had a baby every 18 months. And my dad said they would send him down to the store to get milk. They were not a wealthy family. They were a poor family, and the only person that got the milk was the baby. And so you bring your own bottle down. My father said the first thing the guy did when he opened the can, he took the ladle and scooped off the flies that had drowned in the milk. And then he would fill the bottle. And then my dad said he would go home, and his mother would take the bread that she had made, take the soft inside part of the bread, mix it with the milk. And he said if the baby survived, they would probably live a long time after that. And again, I'm surprised at the amount of product that they have in the stores, okay? You could get a lot of things. Okay. And of course, they always had the displays outside. And look at Whitman's Confections. So there must have been a Whitman's candy there. You also see Cashmere Bouquet soap. And this, I think, was taken around late 1870s, early 1880s. Okay. And again, you can see with the advertising that they had over here. So again, this was on North Main Street, okay? Now, as far as I can recall, there was always, for a long time, a supermarket downtown. Remember Hudness Market on South Main Street? There was Grand Central. And to service the people who lived in that Corky Row area, because people didn't have cars and they had to be able to walk someplace. Again, just some of the buildings, and you'll notice a brick building. So you got a mixture of wooden and brick buildings over here. So this is the fire at the Dr. Durfee's building, and this occurred in 1893. This was on the corner of North Main and Center Street. And the newspaper reported that the total damage in this fire was $8,420. They cost you that much to get a couple of dents out of your car nowadays, I think, doesn't it? And again, there were a number of these houses. There were hotels. This is the Wilbur. Hotel rooming house, if you like. The fellow who owned this was a guy named Darius Wilbur. Rather strange gentleman. He was by nature a chef, but he saved his money and he was able to invest in a building like this. And he was investing a lot of money. He didn't like banks or trust banks, so he carried all of his money on his person. So if you had to collect from him, he would take you into a private room and take the money out and pay you. He'd either pay you or you'd pay him, depending which way the trade was going. But he kind of was a little show-offy because he had a watch chain. On a watch chain, he had a $5 gold piece, $10 gold piece, and a $20 gold piece. So he was a rather odd character. This was on the corner, by the way, of North Main and Central Street. Okay, next. And there's another one of those houses. There was the Richardson house, there was Wilbur, there was the Evans house. Now, I don't know, maybe somebody knows the name of the church. This is a Bank Street. Anyone? No? I thought maybe somebody would know what the name of the church was. Okay. And here's the granite block, the old granite block. Okay, Fall River went through a couple of different urban renewal projects. In 1843, the first one was initiated by a couple of kids playing with a black powder cannon. And what they did was to make it go bang, you loaded the black powder, you put wadding into it, okay, and then you set a match to it. Cannon goes off, makes a bang, the wadding flies out, it's on fire, lands in a pile of wood chips underneath a porch. They start to burn, the house burns, the next house burns, and burnt out just a very large portion of the center of Fall River. So there was lots of room to put new buildings up after that, okay? And the fire was covered pretty well in even the Boston newspapers. It was a tremendous loss. But this is the old granite building, and I'd like you to look at the stones. Very rough, very rough. When you see the new granite block building, you'll see it's got a little bit better. In this particular case, the dirt streets have been replaced, and you also notice the trolley track. So this is going to be after what, 1880? So you can see here, and the cobblestones. Because those of you who know me know my interest in the circus, and this was a picture I found. Remember Jack Gleason, who was a big collector of Fall River material? And one day Jack said to me, "Oh, you're interested in the circus?" He said, "Hanging down in our club is a picture. It's been there forever. Would you like to, I'll let you take it, take the pictures and have them redone," which I did. And so this is the old granite block. But look at the crowd here. Look at the crowd. And then all of those wagons, by the way, a good many of those pony floats that are being pulled in the circus parade still exist. They've all been refurbished. They're out in Circus World Museum out in Baraboo, Wisconsin. Okay, Granite Street. You can see the cobblestones here. This is still a dirt street. And the entrance to the police station is up at the top of the street to the right. These horses had dual purpose. They used the horses to pull watering cart, okay, a sprinkling cart, to keep the dust down in the summertime. They would sprinkle the streets with water, and these horses pull the sprinkling cart. If there was a fire, they pull the fire engines, okay, and they were all horse-drawn in those days. So these are a couple of either fire horses or sprinkling cart horses, depending on what was going on. Interesting building. Fall River Opera House. I doubt whether there ever was an opera in here. And we also find that this particular building is far grander than it actually was. I think this was an artist's conception, and this is what they thought they would like to have, okay? Mason and Fisher were bakers. And you'll notice it's a big building. The address 579 Court Square and 39 Bedford Street. Okay, so this is sort of just up from the corner of Bedford and North Main Street. Now I'll show you the actual, we don't have a whole picture of it. This is the actual building. I'll go back. Okay. So this is the Opera House. What's kind of interesting is the Opera House had some competition later on. They built the Academy of Music. And so the Opera House evidently had turned to more mundane entertainment. And so there was, in 1880-81, there was a hearing to renew the license of the building, and the minister came down and said, all of the poor kids are down there, they're bumming money so they can go see the show. And none other than Robert Remington, who built the Fall River Historical Society building, or actually had it moved from Columbia Street to Rock Street, testified. So he was a man, he was going to get some actual complaints, or not complaints, but stories from the kids. So he goes down and he gets one of the kids, and he said that what they were doing was saying, "Hey, mister, you got 2 pennies or 3 pennies or a nickel, I'd like to go see the show." And so he says to the kid, "What kind of a show did you see?" And the kid says, "A leg show." And that wasn't all. And so he didn't say what that wasn't all was. Remington never saw the show, but he took the kid's word for it. And I'm trying to figure out, I'm interested in what entertained people in those days. It couldn't have been all that bad, I don't think. Yeah, I think in an age where you didn't see ladies' legs, that was ladies in leotards or what have you, in tights, was an attraction. Obviously, it's very evident in the article, it's only the poor kids that went to see this, okay? So it's only the poor kids that went to see the show. And we know that that's not true, okay? Remington evidently didn't go because he couldn't speak as someone who had actually seen the show. Eventually, the Opera House just simply went out of business. The roller here, again, they're putting a macadam street in. In this day, with all this power equipment, I mean, they got a horse pulling this macadam. Look how much macadam they have in there. It must have taken forever to do this. The roller looks like the rollers seem to be made out of concrete or something, okay? Okay, this building was up on Granite Street, and this was a combination building. It was a police station, it had a lockup. This is where they put Lizzie Borden when they locked her up before they took her to Taunton. This was also a fire barn. They had some hand pumpers in there, and it was also a public works building, so it had a multi-use. The old post office and custom house. This was built in 1880. And it was on Facebook the other week, and everybody said, wow, that beautiful building, why did they tear it down? And of course, the excuse was that the rooms inside were too small to be a very useful office. My dad remembered this quite well, and it was 1931 is when they tore it down and built the new post office during the Depression. And my dad used to say this was the local politician getting his share, okay? They got his share from the federal government. So this was a WPA project, my dad thought. And so in other words, they tore it down and built a new building. And again, to make work for people. I show you this. This is the gun house. This is like going to be the most spooky house around. It was on the corner of High Street and Bedford. And it was a hotel in its early days, the Exchange Hotel. And then it ended up being just a couple of elderly women, I believe, and their brother lived in all of these rooms, and it was falling apart. So the city bought it, and they built a second district court there, which is now what is it? Recreation now is in that building, okay?
Was this the largest house in the city?
I think at one time this was the largest house in the city. I forget how many rooms they had, but it was tremendous.
Where was that?
This is on the corner of High Street where the second district court was. They tore they tore this building down to build a second district court on the corner of High and Bedford. Or Rock.
Rock?
Is it Rock and Bedford? I'm sorry, Rock and Bedford, yes. One down, yep.
It's called the Gun Mansion.
Yeah, it was called the Gun Mansion. It was anything but a mansion in its later years, that's for sure. And here's Mason and Fisher, the guys who built the Fort Opera House. And they're steam bakers, as it says. Evidently what happened was they would just bake in large quantities. All of the carts that you see here are all waiting to pick up their pies and breads and things and go out and deliver them. And again, this was the bakery, which is sort of around the corner on Bedford Street. Not so much the buildings here. I like to look at the gas lamps, okay? So Florida was modern downtown. This was a main street, by the way. Okay, and what happened was there was public lighting on the street, and the original lights were oil lamps, but these were actually gas lamps, and there were a few of these, and again, they were kind of show-offy, and they put them in certain places so that people could see them, and we're a modern city, okay, we're growing. And of course, to light those lights, you had the lamp lighter. Remember there was a song in maybe the 50s, the old lamp lighter, long, long ago, and he would go and light the light, and if he came to a bench and there were a couple of young people there, he would skip lighting that light and come back later on. And so it was kind of a nostalgic type piece. A lot of comments a couple of weeks ago on Facebook on the City Hall. This was the original building, to Town Hall and Market Building. It was built in 1845, so it was built after the big fire, okay? So there was room to put this building in. Town offices on the top floor, the first floor are all shops. You'll notice that the banks in the corner, then there was a long corridor that went down, and most of these shops in there were butcher shops. And so if you went down to buy meat, and they had all of the carcasses of the cows and things all hanging up on meat hooks as you went down. At the very end, at the 2nd Street end, there was a fellow named James Boomer, who was a fishmonger. And so you'd buy a whole, fish. He would cut the head off, take the scale it, take the fins off, whether they filleted them for you or not, okay? And then he had a little trap door, which he picked up, and he threw all of that into the Quequechan River, which flowed underneath the City Hall. And better still, since the fish was a little messy, he would then souse the fish in the crystal clear Quequechan River and put it in wrapping paper. And by the way, in all of the stores, there was no such thing as paper bags. Okay, everything was put up in butcher paper. I worked in Kennedy's downtown, and we still wrapped our chicken as late as 1962. No plastic bags. It all went on butcher paper. Now, what's kind of interesting, if you go back one, he does mention a fellow named Jake Sampson, who used to hang around there. Now, Jake had some problems. He lived in the almshouse, so he was pretty much a homeless person, I guess, at the time. It was called Dirty Jake, and Dirty Jake would make some money by delivering the goods. Okay, so you needed somebody to carry all that meat home for you, which certainly wasn't my grandfather, because they couldn't afford that type of thing. He had a wheelbarrow, and he would deliver anywhere in the city for 25 cents. Now, whether anybody ever hired him or not, that's the next question. And of course, in the write-up in the census, he was listed, he was not able-bodied, and it said he was habitually intemperate. So that means he was an alcoholic. Dirty Jake. Now, the building was altered and remodeled in 1872-73, and then in 1886, it burned down. And you can see pretty much, one thing about granite, it stands up, but all the wood on the inside burns away. And you know, mill fires are like that. All of those floors in the mills were covered with oil. When they burn, almost impossible to put them out. You might as well just let them burn. Now, a good shot of the City Hall. You know, it was, somebody said, why did they tear it down? Well, it wasn't really a functional business. You know, it wasn't set up for a lot of offices and things. But it was an imposing building. And it just, from everywhere you look, there it was. And I can think, you know, when you look down South Main Street, there was the City Hall. Okay, and so you see it over here. And again, if you make the turn, you're going up South Main Street in this particular case. You may also take a look at the tower, and you'll see that the shape changes in later years. That was altered. Okay, right here. And of course, there's no Borden building, which would be over here on the right, the Academy building, and all of the buildings on the left, they're all made out of wood, so they're very susceptible to fire. And this is pretty much as it looked, I think, at the end. Okay. 1928, we get a second chance at urban renewal. In this case, it's the fellow who gets it going is a workman who's in the process of tearing down the Bacasset mill. It's a cold day. He builds a fire in a barrel. Fire gets away from him, and not only does what's left of the mill burn down, but just about everything else North Main Street, partway up South Main. And there's the Citizen Savings Bank you can see over here on the right. And you can see the devastation was pretty complete. And another shot. I just imagine cleaning all of this up without all of the really heavy equipment that they have in modern days. Man, it must took a lot of manpower. And here's the crystal clear Quequechan. The mills really did a job on this. To be honest with you, if you look, these buildings here that are along the edge, these are privies. And it was sort of a primitive flush toilet. Okay, they weren't flush toilets, but if the river was flowing fast enough, it would carry the waste away. Right down through underneath the City Hall in that case, and then come out on the other side. Now, by the way, the Quequechan River was the attraction for the center of town. Okay, it was the attraction. It was the first place you go. I mean, it was, the first businessman looked at that and said, in Freeman's Purchase, I want lot number 1. Okay, I want to be able to put a water wheel into that running water, take advantage of that power. So it was always going to be in that particular spot. It was sort of predestined, if you like. It wasn't going to be in the Flint, it wasn't going to be in the Globe. And, okay, and here we get the the Academy building, which is really, it's the Borden block, as they called it. The Borden block, it was named after Nathan Borden. And again, it had a lot of offices in it. They built the Academy Theater in there, which actually was a 3-story theater. But the first floor wasn't part of the theater. It started on the second floor. So it was the second, third, and fourth floors of the building that held the Academy Theater. It was horseshoe-shaped a couple of years ago. Last year we talked about this. Horseshoe-shaped. It was a great theater. And of course, they were the main competition for the Fall Opera House. Okay. J.B. Burrell was Thomas Burrell's brother, and he made harness for horses. He's a leather worker, is what he was. They would also make suitcases and that sort of thing, anything out of leather. And here they're putting in the railroad tracks, as you can see, down on South Main Street. Trolley tracks. These are the trolley tracks that they're putting in.
George, have you seen this one?
I'm sorry?
Have you seen the shot?
Have I seen it?
Yeah.
No.
No.
George is the trolley man.
Yeah, George is the trolley man.
That was probably the horse cars.
For the horse cars, right. Yeah, the first set. Now I can talk about Kennedy's. I worked here 1955, 56, and then from 58 to 62. It was a rather, it was an old-fashioned, it was actually a chain store, by the way, and it was in the Baptist Temple building, okay? And they were our landlord, by the way, the Baptist Temple building. And of course, this was taken before my time, actually. But we sold bulk butter, okay? You came and we'd cut you take a knife, you cut the butter, and everything was in bulk. And we sold bulk coffee, bulk tea. Somebody wrote in there in Facebook that they could still smell the butter. Well, butter didn't have much of a smell, but you had to smell the coffee because we only sold coffee that was we ground. So there was always that coffee smell, and the only people that didn't smell it were the people that worked there. Nature's way, right? There'd be nobody working in sewage treatment plants or at dumps or at landfills if the smells bother them. Eventually, you just get used to it. It was a great store, and I worked there for a long time. They weren't great payers. I was the highest paid part-time clerk that they had, $1.10 an hour. One day, a manager came in, or the supervisor, and he said, "How long has that guy been working here?" And $1 an hour was the minimum wage. He said, "Well, geez," he said, "give him another dime. We can't afford more than that," he said, "but I got $1.10 an hour." So that was big time for me. Later on, they put a chicken count. If you remember, we sold chicken on this side where the bulk sign butter is. And we had a case over here, and we would make a display of chicken on ice, of course. In those days, unlike the old days where you just hung the chickens up, we actually put them on ice. And it was my job on Saturday afternoon to clean that out.
Tell me about your legs.
Pardon?
The guy that came in for chicken.
The guy that came in for what?
Big chicken, and he asked him which legs.
Oh, she wanted me to tell you the story. We had a fellow who came from Federal Hill that worked for Kennedy's. And people would come in and they'd say, "Give me so many pounds of chicken legs." And he would say, "You want right legs or left legs?" Not a word. I mean, the person would go, "What?" He said, "Yeah." So then he would take a right leg and a left leg and show them how they were attached to the chicken, you see. Not that anyone really cared. And we also had some interesting people who, on the outside, not me, but some of the guys that I worked with had names for everybody. And there was a fellow that we would watch all the time. It was an elderly gentleman who wore a raincoat all the time. And he got the name of Bumpy. Because Bumpy liked to pass very close to people, especially ladies. And one day there was an organ grinder out here with a monkey who was collecting change. and Bumpy had a real field day. He was a rather unusual character that named the least. But the guys in the store had names for just about everybody. So it was kind of funny. It was how we kind of
I'm making sure, no, it's not
maintained
my
this.
phone. I'm just making sure my phone is off. That reminded me.
Okay, about the next one.
There.
Okay.
It wasn't my phone.
But anyway, it was a great company. It was out of tune with the times. Who's going to go downtown to buy a pound of butter? Okay? The supermarkets came and they just kind of drove us into the ground. Just like all of downtown. Every time, when you got into the late 60s, every time a new mall opened, business dropped. Until finally you just couldn't support it anymore. Yeah, this is Whitehead's Market.
No, this is Dean's, isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't this Dean's?
No, I thought this was Whitehead's.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, okay. And again, there was Market on North Main Street. And again, this was a time when Kennedy's, by the way, is right across the street from Van Dyke's. They had a nice lunch counter in there, if you recall, and they sold a lot of the same stuff we sold. And so, but again, Kennedy's made their money in World War II, when people would stand in line for an hour, 2 hours to get half a pound of butter. You think that's going to happen today? You can't stand in line for 30 seconds. And so it's just not going to work. And again, here's that dirty old street, looking up South Main Street here. I think that's the Baptist Temple Church. They had a tower on it at the time, I believe, and it was set back from the street originally. Later on, it was moved up, but you can see that this is a dirt street, as you can see. And the 5 and 10s would be over here in the right-hand corner. And Whitehead's again. And you might be right. I think the first one might have been Dean's Market, and this one here is Whitehead's. What's on the floor? Sawdust. My uncle had a store in Pine Street, and he always put sawdust on the floor. At the end of the day, you swept it up, threw it away, put new sawdust on the next day. And of course, it absorbed any spills that you had, liquid and things. It was interesting. I don't think you can even do that today, I don't think, if you wanted to, okay? Although I've been places, if you've been to a Texas Roadhouse, there's not sawdust, but there's peanut shells all over the place. So not a place for people with peanut allergies, that's for sure. And here the chickens hanging up, and I got to assume that's all beef there, and so this must have been winter time or something. But again, the sanitary conditions were marginal at best. This fellow's name is Alfred Ellis Hill. And he's a photographer. And I'm interested in him because he was sort of into entertainment as well. He owned the Great American Photographic Company. And if you notice the sign, it says Bonham's Museum of Fall River. Now, he had nothing to do with P.T. Bonham. P.T. Bonham is one of my favorite characters, and it had a museum in New York City. But this guy at least tried to copy him a little bit. And you could go to the museum for free. And one of the things he had in the museum were these birds that had this luminescent foliage. And the reason they was luminescent was that he treated them with his photographic chemicals. I don't think it did much for the birds, you know. Okay, but then he had these dancing turkeys, again, which was you couldn't do it today. And the dancing turkeys, the floor of the cage was made of zinc. Underneath the floor of the cage was a lamp, which kept it warm. Not hot, but warm, so the turkeys kind of walked with an exaggerated step. But that's what happened in those days, by the way, folks. But that would be an attraction, especially if it were free. He also had something that Bonham had. He had a mermaid. Now, these are a lot more common than I thought. Bonham bought a mermaid, by the way, which he called a Fiji mermaid, advertised it in his museum. When you went to see it, it was the torso of a monkey sewn onto the tail end of a fish. And it would be all dried out. And people would say, that's not a mermaid. That's a monkey and a fish. And when Bonham would say, Oh, geez. He said, the guy that sold it to me said that's what it was. So anyway, I don't know what Hill said, by the way, but he had one of these as well, and they were fairly common. I'm watching TV one night on PBS, and there's an antique dealer in England. He buys all of these antiques, and he goes into these mansions, and he tries to sell them to people. And one of the things he shows up with is one, I can see it, it's got a sheet over it, but the head's sticking out, and it's one of these mermaids. And as he gets in, the lady of the house says, I don't want that. And that was the end of that. So he sold it to somebody else, I guess. Kind of interesting, because you get your picture taken with the birds. And you might notice the frame is almost given away. Only 25 cents. And again, I know there's somebody sitting up on the roof. The Western Union Telegraph office, when it was down on North Main Street, had an operator, and the operator had an extra little finger. And he was sort of an attraction. And Burrell says that what would happen if you had visitors come down to see you, one of the big things you did was go down to see the guy with the extra finger and have him. There wasn't much entertainment in Fall River, you know. Okay. This must be Ocean State job lot of the late 19th century, right? The cheapest store. And man, that's 4 stories tall.
Low-price Lenny?
Low-price Lenny, yeah. Yeah. So even back then, there was the attraction of sales and cheap things.
Is this the Troy store?
I think later on it might have become the Troy store, yeah. This on the corner of Pleasant and Borden. Pleasant and Borden.
4th.
4th Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
Became Kaplan's Furniture.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Kaplan's Furniture, okay. Thank you, George. Next. And again, this is up South Main Street. And again, you see that the Daily Herald, and that what they would do is they would take just a long sheet of paper and write the headlines, and the idea is that would get you interested to buy the newspaper and read the whole story. And then also,
At this point in time, did Tiffany come down to?
This is what we're talking about.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Tiverton came down, the Rhode Island-Massachusetts line was marked by the buttonwood tree, okay, which was on South Main Street.
The top of Columbia.
Just about the top of Columbia Street. And if you looked, it kind of went down Columbia Street. The Florida Historical Society building, where it is, when it was down there, about 3/4 was in Massachusetts and 1/4 in Rhode Island. I don't know how they figured out taxes and things, but I'm sure they had no problem when it came to collecting them. So that was the old buttonwood tree, and that was the dividing line. And there are all sorts of things. There was a Florida, Rhode Island, a Florida, Massachusetts, and those are all stories within themselves, really. And Gay's Gallery of Art, I put it up here only because I've seen so many of these cabinet cards with Gay's mark on the back, and a lot of, I know, I like the circus and things. Circus performers would come in and would go down to Gay's and have these little cards made, these little advertising cards to advertise their acts. Okay, and then finally we have here the Borden building or the Academy building, and then over to the right you still have those. It remains, again, this is again, there's still mostly horse and wagons here, so. And here we get some of the more modern postcards, okay? And this may be what you remember. Kind of interesting. Can you go back just one? Okay, this is the earlier picture over here, you'll notice, and then we'll go to the next one, which is the same. Okay, and you notice the store in the corner is called Spencer. Then it's Kresge's. Now, did anyone notice anything about these two pictures? They are postcards. Just toggle between the two. They're the same.
One car.
The colors are different because what happened was they would send these off when they needed a new supply. My guess is when Cressy's came in, that looks like it's a fake sign that the artist put in, okay? And that's what he did here. And these were hand tinted, and some of them were hand tinted in Germany. So the German guy would say, this black and white picture, what do I color this? Well, okay, the buildings around here are all made out of sandstone or brick, and so that's the color you get. You notice, you'll notice the cars are two-tone. They're yellow and, looks like they're yellow and black on one.
3 cars here, and there's only 2 cars here.
Yeah.
They got rid of the car.
Oh yeah, one of them moved. And the bus, they changed the color of the bus as well. Okay.
That same man is crossing the street.
Yeah, it's a slow walker. Next. Okay, and this is pretty much, but again, this is one that's been colored. I mean, the people look like dolls almost because they weren't done very, it looked like there was a kind of a fast paint job. But you probably remember the cop in the box downtown. You know, this is the downtown we know. For a kid who lived in the Flint, I had never been to New York City. I went to Boston twice. Went to see a Red Sox game, and once to see my dad took me up to see we went to see a vaudeville show at the time. And that was a big thing. Going downtown was a big thing. For 10 cents, you went down, took the bus, and it was a busy place. There was nothing else like it. I lived in the Flint, and we had our own shopping center, but you couldn't compare it to downtown. That's where all the good stuff was, that's for sure. And we covered theaters last year. There were 7 theaters that I can remember operating at one time downtown. Bill mentioned this last week, the Mohegan Hotel, which is on the corner of Central and North Main Street, and of course this burned down in the 28 fire. And this is the Hotel Mellon, which was across the street. You remember they turned it into the City Hall after they tore down the City Hall that we had. And these are some rather interesting photos as well. The granite block on the left, and of course over here on the right, the City Hall and the trolleys. Now this is a pretty neat, this looks like this was I don't know if they had color film, but I don't think they did, but it looks like it's been digitized. But here's one that's not. And take a look at that, the men crossing the street just look like little dolls, and they don't look like real people. You also notice that those trolley cars don't have to running on electricity because there are no wires. So the artists that did them, they never bothered. They just took those right out.
And the brick.
And oh yeah, if you look on the left, there's the granite block. Go back to you get the other one. Different color, okay? One's red and one is sort of gray. Okay. Again, the Academy building, which still stands, because you remember they took the theater out. It's all, a lot of it is senior citizen housing right now. And again, here we see the Main Street is all cobblestone, and you see a double set of tracks. And there's the City Hall. That's the picture I remember the most. You look down South Main Street towards the north, and there was the City Hall. And it,
green or red? See, in this one
yeah,
it's green.
one of them is green and one of them is red.
Which one was it?
It was red, but not all of it.
No, I mean just the tower at the top. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I thought it was copper, which would mean it would be green. I think if that were the case, but I'm not really quite sure. I can't remember that. And of course, you remember the R.A. McQuarrie's was just down the street from where I worked in Kennedy's.
Can you go back one, Bob?
Sure, go back one.
So at the top of the Academy building, what is that? It looks like a horse, like a mobile.
I think it was an advertising sign. Mobile gas. The flying horse, Pegasus. Yeah. McQueer's the greatest department store that we had. And remember, you could buy anything in McQueer's. It was so old-fashioned, though, if you remember. They had floor walkers. They had ladies were always dressed up. The clerks were not in
Vacuum tubes?
and the vacuum tubes, of course, rather interesting. And then an actual photograph here. Looking down the Granite Block, the Mohegan Hotel, looking north. Citizens Savings Bank. And again, with the exception of the electric wires, this is not too bad, okay? Fairly well done job. In 1911, we had the Cotton Centennial to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the first mill in the city. Not the first mill downtown. First mill downtown was a couple of years later. The mills, Fall River was a cotton capital of certainly America, if not the world. If we were in the world, we might be second, okay? But we produced a lot of cotton cloth. They employed a lot of people. And the mills in their heyday, Fall River had a population, 110 to 20. How much?
122,000.
122,000, Stephanie tells me. Today we have 88,000. So there is quite a difference. And the mills were the attraction. That's why I'm here, and a good many people sitting here right here. Now, there were different proposals. Now, you know, the proposal that won out was to take the city hall down and build a highway right through the center of the city. But this was done in 1922. Okay, and okay, you can see here's the city. No, go back one. Here's the city hall as it is. This is as it looks now. Their proposal was they had two proposals. One to leave the city hall and put these other buildings in, but here they take it down. This is the new city hall with the big tower. And this proposal here was, I don't know, an arena or a coliseum or something or other. I think one of those buildings was a museum later on. And of course, that wasn't to be. But I did notice that they did leave, the old post office was left in this particular case, and of course that had changed. This was 1922, this proposal came. Okay, eventually what won out, and I can remember all of the commotion. They're going to tear the city hall down, this and that. We're going to build this highway right through the center of the city. City hall will sit on top of it, and it's going to unite the south and the north, if you like, sort of like the Mason-Dixon line. and it didn't seem to do much of anything, okay?
That would have been pretty with the park and everything.
Yeah, that looks. I kind of think this is kind of neat with the actual this big open area with lots of walking spaces and things. They did say if you didn't want the tower, you didn't have to put it in, but of course it came to nothing anyway, which very often happens.
It was a study.
Yeah, and just a few words in this particular case. We got a finale here. So before we put that on, I just wanted to mention that Main Street was always going to be downtown, okay? And every city has a downtown no matter where you are. Even New York City, I guess, it's Times Square, if you like. It's the busy part. There was nothing to compete with downtown in Fall River from the start, from the time it was a Crossroads. Do we have the final thing here? And on the Crossroads, I was going to say, we went from a sleepy Crossroads to a bustling city to a sleepy Crossroads. But that's not true. We have too much of a tendency to put ourselves down. It's not a sleepy Crossroads anymore, but it's certainly not a busy place either, okay? And so, but in any case, Fall River's heyday, probably with the mills, that was our peak. So my producer here put this together for you, and I hope you enjoy it.
Wait. Yeah.
That's me, yes. I'm older than you think.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go.
2 o'clock. Bet you haven't heard this version.
All the noise and the gentle bossa nova. You'll be dancing with them too before the night is over. Happy again. The lights are much brighter there. You can forget all your troubles, get all your cares, so go downtown, where all the lights are bright. Downtown, waiting for you tonight. Downtown, you're gonna be alright now. Downtown, things will be great when you're downtown. Don't wait a minute more. Downtown, everything's waiting for you.
Here's a dose of nostalgia for tonight. Thank you, Stephanie, for that last piece. Nicely done. If anyone has questions, you want to stop by and talk, fine. We are going to be here next week. I guess if you'd like to come, I'd be here by about 3 in the afternoon.